What's going on, guys? In H.A.T format, I would say that Infernity, or Xyz Infernity to be exact, is one of the decks that every hand can change the outcome of the end board. I feel like Xyz Infernity is definitely a deck that feels a lot like a puzzle where you look at your hand and you just kind of have to play it out and try to figure out all the different possible lines that the deck can actually come with the most random hands possible. And for that reason, I feel like Xyz Infernity is a very difficult deck in H.A.T format. Now, this video specifically has to do with something that happened in the most recent H.A.T format replay review that I had looked at between Spellbook and Infernity. So I don't want to give away any spoilers to that video, so if you haven't checked that video out, I would suggest pausing this video, going down to the video description, and watching that matchup so that you don't get spoiled on what actually happens in that video. But I'm going to give it a couple seconds here, finish this sentence, and then I'm going to start saying what kind of happened in that video. Anyways, if you guys did see that, let's get into it. In that game, it ended up going to a game 3, and in that game 3, Infernity got to start the duel. Now, their hand in that duel was very, very awkward. It ended up being the first 5 cards being 5 monsters, and then their draw for turn luckily ended up being a spell card. And so for this video, what I want to do is first off show you guys the hand that they had opened, and then I want to talk about, you know, what I think of their play, because what they ended up doing was simply normal summoning a Dark Grepher, discarding one, and sending a card from deck to graveyard off the Grepher effect and passing turn. Now, it was a very bizarre hand. I'll actually just show you real quick what the hand was. It ended up being not 1, but 2 copies of Dark Grepher, 1 copy of Summoner Monk, 1 copy of Infernity Archfiend, and 1 copy of Hieratic, which, again, if you've never really messed around with Infernity too much, you might be looking at this hand and thinking it's completely unplayable, and the draw for turn was luckily a copy of Soul Charge. I just want to kind of talk about how I think they could have played this out, specifically against Spellbook, but also just in general, kind of look at this as a puzzle and try to figure out what the image actually is of what this can turn into. Now, the one thing I can say is I don't know their specific build, but what is lucky is in H.A.T format, Infernity is what I would say is kind of I wouldn't say solved, because I don't like that word for any type of older format, but I feel like it's in a position where a lot of people can agree on, for the most part, how the deck should look in terms of main deck and extra deck. There's obviously a few variations, and the main variations that I would say are some people choose to play 2 Lavalval Chain in the extra deck, while some people choose to play 3 copies, and the other one is right here with the Stygian Street Patrol. Some people choose to play 2 copies, and other people choose to play 3. So for this video, I want to go over what would happen had they only played 2 copies of Stygian Street Patrol, and what they could have done if they're playing 3 copies. So without further ado, let's get into this video. So the first thing I thought when I saw this hand is, because they were able to draw that Soul Charge for turn, it means the Dark Grepher is going to have a much higher impact on this hand. And the other thing to note is we see the Dark Grepher, we see the other Dark Grepher, and we see the Summoner Monk. All 3 of those have different typings. Obviously, the Dark Greffers being warriors, and the Summoner Monk being a spellcaster. So the thing with that is that means Stygian Street Patrol is not going to be able to get those cards out of your hand, so you're going to need to use the Greffers to actually try to get cards out of your hand, and because you have the Soul Charge, it means you can kind of play this in a few different ways, and actually pretty much be able to use Grepher multiple times in the turn, which will allow you to get rid of these. And then because we have 2 Fiend monsters, obviously seeing Hieratic isn't great. It means we won't be able to go and do any Palabyrinth plays, but we already have Archfiend access, and again, these are fiends, so once we get sending on some street patrols, then obviously we know that we can get these out of hand. The other thing is we have to think about the fact that we're playing against Spellbook. Similar to how I mentioned, they ended up starting with a Greffer, and I believe they discarded the Hyrus to send a copy of Street Patrol, and they passed. The thing is while this board probably won't end on the strongest thing, there is a way to make it end on good follow-up, and that's what's very key, especially because Spellbook, while it might seem like a deck that can't OTK you, a lot of times that deck does either main or side cards like DD Crows, meaning the later the game goes on, the higher chance you have of them finding outs to your cards, as well as a lot of times they do play things like Trap Tricks, Trap Hole Nightmare, Solemn Warning, your basic trap cards like your Torrentials or Fiendish Chains. So you want to try to at least put up a solid enough board where you don't have to deal with those cards moving into your turn 2 or turn 3 of the game. So I want to go over first is the one that's going to require 3 copies of Stygian Street Patrol, but will have better follow-up. So let's start on this combo here. Alright, so to start this combo off, the obvious move in my opinion is to start by normal summoning a copy of Dark Greffer. This is simply because you do have the soul charge, so, whatever you send, you'll be able to soul charge back, or just in general, it's a way to get cards out of your hand, the monsters specifically. So here, I'm going to activate Dark Greffer, and because, again, I have that soul charge, I'm going to discard the other copy of Dark Greffer, and again, this is the more risky play, so rather than sending a Street Patrol here, what I'm going to do is go and send a copy of Armageddon Knight, which kind of acts as a Greffer minus needing to discard. And here, I'm going to send that. Next, what I'm going to do is, while this does look kind of weak, what I'm going to do is start and soul charge right away. This is going to bring back the Greffer and the copy of Armageddon Knight. From here, Armageddon Knight was special summoned, so its effect will trigger, and from this point, I'm going to go and send a copy of Stygian Street Patrol. After that, obviously this is a point where your opponent might consider a Crow, but simply because we do have multiple level 4s, they're going to expect a copy of Lavalval Chain to be viable here, so they probably aren't going to Crow this. So at this point, what we can do is use the Greffer. And again, we have these 3 monsters in hand. Only one of those, being the Summoner Monk, can't get out of your hand by Stygian Street Patrol's Banish effect. So what we're going to do is use the Greffer and send the copy of Summoner Monk to graveyard to send another card from the deck to the grave. So at this point, you do have, several different options of what you can actually go and send, and I think the main 2 options you should be looking at, because you already have Archfiend access, is either going to be Necromancer or simply just another copy of Street Patrol. So for this exactly, I think I'm going to send another Street Patrol simply because it will allow us to get everything out of hand completely, and it also puts them in a weird situation where if they did have a Crow, you already have multiple lines to be able to play through it. So at this point, what we're going to do is banish a copy of the Stygian Street Patrol. I'm going to put it kind of off screen at the bottom here. Once we cut to later in the combo, I'll probably show that off again more. And here we're going to summon the Archfiend Hyrus. The reason we're summoning this first is because this means the other Street Patrol is going to be able to special summon the Archfiend, at which point we will have no cards in hand, meaning we will get the effect off of this. So we're going to go to the graveyard, get that other Street Patrol, and activate it. Again, now we have 2 Street Patrols banished, and summon the copy of Archfiend. Sorry about the glare here, just the way my camera and everything is set up. In order to have at least somewhat decent lighting, it is kind of glaring there, so apologies for that. Here the Archfiend will activate. The thing to keep in mind is look at the amount of 4s we have. We have multiple lines that we can go in order to actually get to a third street patrol. So in this exact case, and since we have the level 3 Hieris on board, what we're going to do is add a copy of Necromancer. From this point, we just need to start making some space. So what I'm going to do is take the Archfiend and overlay it with any of the 4s. It really doesn't matter in this exact situation. So here, for the sake of this, I'm just going to make right here with the Dark Grepher. What we're going to do is go into our first copy of Lavalval Chain, right here. And from here, what we're going to do is activate the effect of Lavalval Chain, detach the Archfiend, very important to get that in Graveyard, and we're going to go and send our third Stygian Street Patrol. Now from here, you have 2 options. It doesn't really matter the order in which you're going to go for. You could either banish the Street Patrol now and get the Necromancer out of hand, or you can overlay with these 2. Now the thing is, whatever you overlay these 2 into are going to stay on the board throughout this whole combo, and it's going to be part of your end board. So in some cases, you could go for something like an early Key Beetle, since both are dark. You could go for a Karen Gorgon if you want your end board to have a little bit of targeting protection in a sense. Obviously, we're going against Spellbook, so they have cards like Fate, so this might not be as relevant as something like a Key Beetle. You could even end on, another Dweller, or I guess I shouldn't say another, but a Dweller in general, though that doesn't do anything against Spellbooks. You could go for something like a Rhapsody in Berserk, because you're going to end on at least 1 Xyz by the end of this, so you could just equip this to whatever Xyz to make it a little beefier and hard to out. But I think in order to make this even better and have better follow-up, what we're going to do is overlay both of these for a copy of Lavalval Chain. And this will make sense a little more later on. And also, the thing is, this now threatens you having the ability to foolish any monster you might need at any point in this combo. So if they were being really, really resilient and holding out on using a Crow or something in order to try to stop the Archfiend when you get to Launcher or anything else, it means you always have access to send something else or potentially stack your deck as well. From this point, we're going to go to our graveyard here and banish the copy of Street Patrol to summon the copy of Necromancer we have here. And at this point, we're going to use Necromancer to summon back the Archfiend. Archfiend effect is going to get a search because we have no cards in hand. And at this point, you have a couple options. You could go for another Archfiend. You could go for a Launcher. You could obviously go for a Barrier, a Break, or something like that. But I think it's good to kind of extend out a little further at this point. So what I'm going to do is go for the copy of Launcher, and I'm going to activate it here so that we have no cards in hand again. At this point, what I'm going to want to do is go and overlay the Necromancer that was used with the Hieris for a copy of Levier. For this, Levier, there is a chance that the Levier could stay on board. I would personally summon this in defense, though this is going to be one of the less threatening things on your end board, so it doesn't really matter. But here, I'm just going to summon it off to the side here in defense position, and then we're going to use the effect, and it's important to detach the Necromancer here, so that we have access to it in gray for this Launcher. And with that, we're going to go to our banish pile, take one of the Street Patrols, and summon it. At this point, we're going to then overlay, and we need to clear zones. So everyone's favorite Infernity board clear, we're going to go for a copy of Direwolf. And next, what we're going to do is use Direwolf, and specifically here, detach the copy of Archfiend. Again, we're playing around a million different hand traps, and just in general, if they haven't held a hand trap or used a hand trap at this point, they probably don't have it. Again, Spellbook is a deck that usually would play something like Max C's, Crows, or Veilers, so at this point you probably would have seen one of those come down, but just as, in general for good play measures, just detach the Archfiend here, and we're going to use Direwolf to either pop your Lavalval Chain, or your Levier. In this case, I think I'm going to get rid of the Lavaval Chain, simply because Levier plays a role later game if you survive to the next turn. So now we have our board cleared. We have a Archfiend engrave, a Necromancer engrave, and our Stygian back. We're going to use the copy of Launcher to summon back our copy of Necromancer and our copy of Archfiend. Now at this point, because we have the Stygian still in graveyard, what I'm going to do is go, and rather than searching the barrier or break here, I'm going to go for another copy of Archfiend, because we still have another layer to this combo that we can actually do. From here, we're going to banish the third Street Patrol again, and summon the Archfiend, and at this point, we are going to use the Archfiend to either search a copy of Barrier or Break, and this really comes down to what you made here. If you went for something like a Karen Gorgon, you might feel a little safer going for something like the Break first, because we're going to be making another Xyz here. If not, I think Barrier is just the way to go, and you could in theory just end here having two Archfiends in attack position so that the Barrier is always live. Plus, again, if you went for Karen Gorgon here, or if you went for a Key Beetle, you could just detach a material, target this, and prevent its destruction. But what we're going to do instead here is we are going to search the Barrier, but then we're going to go here and overlay both Archfiends. And at this point, we will go for the copy of Key Beetle. Again, sorry about this glare. It is really bad. And so yeah, we're going to use the copy of Key Beetle here to protect the copy of Barrier. Now again, it really just depends whatever Xyz this was. And then from here, we haven't used the Necromancer that was summoned back off the Launcher. So we're going to use the effect, summon back the Archfiend. And at this point, the Archfiend can trigger to get a copy of Break. And this is going to be our end board of a defense position Levier, our Necromancer, our Lavaval Chain, our Key Beetle, and our Archfiend. And in this exact situation, what's interesting is your opponent is going to want to out the copy of Archfiend, simply because that, if they out this, it turns off the Barrier. But they can't just pop the Barrier because the Key Beetle is protecting it. They can't just run this over easy because, you do have Infernity Break. So it adds multiple layers to this combo where your opponent doesn't really know what is the best thing to out. The other thing is right here, we can detach from the Lavaval Chain to stack our deck. And that's important because with this combo, we should still have a Necromancer in deck and Archfiend. So here, depending on how you think your opponent is going to break your board, you could either stack Necromancer to the top, so you can then summon it, switch it to defense, use the effect, bring back the Archfiend if you think they're going to clear your whole board, or you could just simply stack the Archfiend, so if they clear any part of your board, you have your top deck Archfiend that will special summon back, and we still have Infernity Breaks in deck, so once this gets summoned, we can still search even more follow-up. So in this position, again, you are just set so much better than just summoning Grepher and passing, and that's if you do have 3 Street Patrol. There's other combos as well if you play multiple Levier, but the end board for the next combo is going to be somewhat similar, and that's going to be the result of only playing 2 Street Patrol. Alright, so for the second example, I want to try to get to a similar end board as the last time, except this time only using 2 copies of Stygian Street Patrol, just in case he was only on 2 copies. So starting off, I think the best play is still going to be to summon the copy of Dark Grepher and discard the other copy of Grepher. Though this time, I think what we should maybe do is, rather than sending an Armageddon Knight, is go and send a copy of Stygian Street Patrol. This way we get a Stygian in rotation early on, and also what we're able to do is banish this. I'm going to set it off to the side here to summon our copy of Archfiend that won't be able to trigger because we do have, multiple cards in hand, but it'll allow us to basically make an Xyz before going for our Soul Charge play, which will allow us to basically bring back an extra body. So in this exact situation, what I think we're going to go for is go and overlay both of these for, you guessed it, a copy of Lavalval Chain. In which case we're going to activate Lavalval Chain and here detach the Grepher. Since we do still have 2 dark monsters in hand, we're going to be able to use the double Grepher effect yet again. So here what we can do is there's a handful of things we could send. We could send, an Archfiend, a Necromancer, another Street Patrol. I think I want to be a little more careful right at this point with the other Street Patrol, simply because in this example, again, we're only playing 2. So here, I think I'm going to send a copy of Necromancer. And at this point, we have double Grepher and Necromancer in grave. So we can go ahead and use that Soul Charge to summon all 3 back. So this is now our new board. We still have 2 cards in hand. So next, we're going to use the Grepher effect, discarding the Summoner Monk. And here, what we're going to do is send a copy of... We have these as our options usually. I think here, there really is a handful of things we can go for. I think here I'm going to send a copy of Archfiend. And then after that, we'll use the other Grepher, sending the Hyris. At which point, we again have that same sort of option of what we should send here, which I feel like it could matter, but it also might not matter as much, because if we send the Street Patrol, we're just going to use the Necromancer, summon back the Archfiend, and add the other one, though this will kind of make so that we're out of copies of Street Patrol already. But I think for this example, I think here we will send the Street Patrol just to play it a little more safe in this example. Now here we have no cards in hand, so what we're going to do is use the Necromancer that we summoned off a Soul Charge to get the Archfiend. At which point, we can then use the Archfiend effect, and we will get a copy of Necromancer to hand. Next, what we're going to do, here we'll overlay the Archfiend and a Grepher. It might not matter here, but just to play it safe so that we're going to get it off the board, we're going to go here and go for a copy of Direwolf. Use Direwolf, detaching Archfiend, obviously, to pop the Direwolf and the Lavalval Chain that also had a copy of Archfiend under it. From here, again, we do have a copy of Street Patrol here. So what we're going to do is banish the Street Patrol. So now we've used our 2 to summon the Necromancer. Necromancer effect can then bring back the Archfiend. From here, Archfiend will trigger. And I think what I want to do here is go for the copy of Launcher. We're going to activate Launcher to keep no cards in hand, just as a good reminder. Then from here, we're going to overlay both copies of Necromancer that have both been used for a copy of Levier. Use the effect of Levier, detaching the Necromancer to bring back the copy of Street Patrol. And what's cool here is we do have access to another rank 4, as well as we already have a Necromancer and a copy of Archfiend in graveyard, which is very nice because, again, when we use this launcher, by overlaying one of these, we will have more zones available, which is very good. In this case, you could even just overlay, say, both of these for another Direwolf to clear more space if you really, really wanted to, though there's not entirely a good reason to want to do that in this exact case. So what I think we can go for is, let me just double check here, we only have the one Archfiend here, so I think here, what I think I want to go for in this exact case now is to go and overlay the Archfiend and Stygian for another copy of Lavalval Chain, and we're not going to use this just yet, similar to how we didn't the last time. Now what we're going to do is use the copy of Launcher to go and summon back our copy of Necromancer in graveyard and our copy of Archfiend. Archfiend will then trigger and allows us to go and search our barrier. What we can then do is overlay the copy of Archfiend and Grepher. And much like last time, we're going to get to go for our copy of Key Beetle, in which case we can, let me just see grave here. We don't have an Archfiend in grave at the moment, so we'll detach the Archfiend off of the copy of Key Beetle to protect the copy of Barrier. Then this was the Necromancer that was summoned back off of the copy of Launcher, so we can use the effect because we have no cards in hand to summon back the copy of Archfiend. And from here, what we're able to do is Archfiend's effect will trigger to add the copy of Break. And then lastly, similar to last time, we can go and detach a material here. We can get rid of the Archfiend or, you know, the Stygian if you really want. I think in case your opponent were to top deck a Crow after the fact, maybe just detaching the Archfiend would be all right here, though it won't really matter if they can't clear the board and you have the Levier. And we do still have a copy of Archfiend in deck, so we can stack that on top of the deck, and we do still have, obviously, more breaks in deck, so that we're able to, off of the Archfiend, get the break. Unfortunately, we don't have an extra copy of Necromancer, so we wouldn't be able to stack the Necromancer there, but we were able to get to the same end board with only using 2 copies of Street Patrol. Anyways, guys, there are plenty of other combinations and outcomes that this hand can actually have, so if you've tested it out or want to test it out now, definitely do so, and let me know if you come up with a better end board or something cool that this hand can actually produce. Again, it's better than what a lot of people might think when they see such a heavy monster hand in Infernity, and this was just off of the first take. I had literally just finished that match, and I was baffled by the fact that they didn't even make an attempt. But, you know, it is player preference. They might not be, you know, the most skilled with the deck. They might be new to it. I'm not entirely sure, so this definitely isn't here to bash them. It's just to kind of show off if you play around with the deck a little more, even the worst hands can actually make some pretty neat end boards. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like on it. Comment any questions or videos you want to see in the future. Share this video with your friends. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to get notified anytime I put a new video out. And anyways, guys, I will see you in the next video.